when I first heard the news was like, okay, like a little bit of like, I don't want to say it was a letdown, but it was just kind of like, okay, so what we all thought would happen, it kind of happened. And when I was talking to Scotty about it today, like the same thought process crept in my head where it was just like, this was very Quinntricia like.
Yeah.
And you know, first of all, hockey is a different sport. Steve Yzerman is a different caliber of GM uh, than Bob Quinn ever was. So there are definitely their differences, but I'm right there with you where there was a part of me that kind of like had this feeling of like I wasn't exactly thrilled with the fact that like so many people in the media kind of knew exactly what Steve Yzerman was probably going to do. Right. There was a lot of people that came out and said like he's probably going to hire somebody he knows. And there were people that were saying like it wouldn't be a surprise if he went back and got somebody from Tampa Bay. Not that it's a terrible place to get a coach from, because like you pointed out, they've been successful, back-to-back Stanley Cups. They were in the Stanley Cup Finals this year. They had a chance to three-peat. So it's not the worst franchise to pluck a coach from, but it does kind of give you that pause when you're also a Lions fan. You're just like, this feels very deja vu-ish. I think Detroit sport fans are easily triggered when we start to see like patterns, and the minute that pattern looks too similar, it's just like, like we talked about this a couple weeks ago when like the Pistons made the trade for Jeremy Grant, right? Like, and they were like, everybody was like, oh, they have so much cap space, and there was like that pocket of fans that were just like, nah, the last time we had this much cap space, we signed X, Y, and Z. Like, it's just the life of being a Detroit sports fan where like you are easily triggered when things just seem a little too good to be true. And I think that's kind of the case with Derek Lalonde, is that it seems a little too good to be true that you're getting a coach from a winning organization that has a history of working with young players, who has a history with your GM. So he's familiar with how your GM is going to want to build this team. Like everything seems too perfect to where like I think everybody's, and probably rightfully so, at least for the first season, is going to side eye this whole like run, right, of head coach GM, because it's like, what is this actually going to look like between these two, and what should be the expectations, which is, it's funny, I feel like we've been asking ourselves this like every other year with a different team. It's just like, okay, so what are the expectations for this team? And so now it's the Red Wings turn where it's like, okay, what are the expectations with this new regime?
As far as expectations for the season, I would have to go back to something that you were talking about with what the expectation was for sort of Dan Campbell, in that, we know they're not going to win a Stanley Cup, just like we knew Lions were going to go to a Super Bowl. But what I would like to see is what my expectation is the formation of some form of identity, some team identity. You had the 90s, you had the Russian Five, and Konstantinov was just punishing people, and incredibly successful. They knew who they were and they knew what they needed to do. And then in 2008, you had basically what was essentially an all-star team. It was like,
Yeah, right.
like the best players in the NHL at that time, and they all managed to wrangle their egos and work together, and it was amazing. So I would like to see some form of identity emerge, because I think I'd mentioned this before, but the couple games that I was able to see, aside from the defensive issues, was they were just very soft and timid going into the corners. And I feel like just that sort of like you can't win in the NHL without aggression at that level. Like just maybe not even aggression, just lack of fear to just go into the corner. I know I'm going to get hit. I know I'm going to take the hit, but and maybe the players were just not doing it because they just didn't play that way, in which case I think that's a larger issue. But if they were doing it, if they had just sort of made the conscious choice of like, nah, it's not worth it for this coach, it's not worth it for this season, it's still an issue, but that can kind of be coached out of them, I think.
Well, either way, like regardless of the situation, whether it's not wanting to play for that coach or not having the mental fortitude to kind of lay your body out, lay your body on the line for your team, that's a problem either way, and it's something that Derek Lalonde is going to have to wrangle one way or the other. He's going to have to motivate those guys to reach that level of want to. Because I agree with you. I think another part of it is that like this team looks like it's full of finesse players, right? Like outside of Mo Sider, who's an imposing human being, I don't know if this team has enough tough guys on it. And Scotty would know this better. So I mean, when he's back next week, he can probably speak to this a little bit better than we can. I feel like you need more of those guys. And I think it kind of speaks to what you were saying. Like with the Wings in the 90s, they eventually needed that. Like they had Yzerman, who was a finesse player, and they had some good players here and there. But again, if you don't have enough guys that are willing to do the dirty work, who are willing to get physical, I think like again, you look at the Pistons. The Pistons were that way for a while, where they're like, you know what, like we may not be, finesse and fancy and maybe not necessarily have the best players in the league, but we will literally kick the crap out of you for 4 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of it, like we'll just be tougher than you.
Right.
So it wouldn't surprise me, and that's why I think like the biggest thing that Derek Lalonde has to do is he's going to have to put in that defensive intensity somewhere, and pull it out of a couple guys. Maybe you don't need every single team, right? Like I don't necessarily need Larkin ready to throw hands every time he gets cheap shotted, but I need somebody on that team to be like, oh, Larkin just got cheap shotted. Let me go out there and be what Mac was for those Wings teams and the grind line, what they were for those Stanley Cup teams. To have a group of guys, whether it's second line, third line, fourth line, whatever, that's going to go out there and do the dirty work.